Okay, guys, this is going to be a wild episode. The tagline for this podcast is "This podcast will make you high," and it's tongue in cheek. However, even when I discuss certain things, as I listen back to what I've said, you do get a feeling of like surreality, right? Like a separation from what is real, because the idea behind this podcast is to sort of challenge conventional notions of what reality is. In some episodes, I think I accomplished that better than others. And I'm probably being hard on myself. That's my Virgo self, but it stands. Now, I've said all that to humble myself so that I can follow up with this statement. This episode is going to make you feel high. If by the end of this episode, you're not like, whoa, then I've failed. And I'm saying that with such confidence because as I play with these ideas in my mind, I've been feeling a bit high. And I'm not like I haven't microdosed or anything like that the last couple of days. I've actually been doing a detox. I think I've had parasites on my mind so much that I thought, I think it's time for me to do a sort of like detox. So I've been drinking Palo d'Arco tea, caprylic acid, wormwood. So my mind is surprisingly clear, in the sense of actually I should say clearer than normal because I have been detoxing hard, cutting out sugar, no caffeine. I don't consume caffeine anyway, but I'm just throwing that in there in case you guys are feeling inspired. I don't drink alcohol either, but completely cutting out anything that is just not good, that will cloud my mind or, any sort of brain fog or anything like that. So I've just been doing that. So I am not high, but I have stumbled onto some concepts this week, or I've been led to some concepts this week, that as I've listened to them and read them, I've thought, wow, like I feel high. So I want to share this feeling with you guys. I didn't set up the camera today because I don't want any distractions from what I'm trying to say. I don't want to distract you guys from what I'm trying to say, and I don't want to distract myself from what I'm about to say. Because I think this episode, I'm setting it up, and I hope you will not be disappointed at the end of it. But this is a lot of setup to say that this episode is, I can feel it's going to be one of the more profound ones if I'm successful in getting all the ideas that are swimming in my head out. Okay, so I'm going to take the words. Let's start with two words: individual and atom. Okay, so we live in a society where people don't question things beyond the labels, right? And if you are a regular listener, I think a couple episodes ago, I've railed against labels for a while. In fact, I have an episode from a couple of weeks ago that literally says like, fuck your labels, right? I railed against labels because you slap a label on something and it stops people from thinking. And it stops people from thinking beyond the label, right? Well, why are we using this label? Why are we using this term? What does this mean, right? And not only that, labels force you into a particular sort of thinking, into a particular box. So I don't like labels. So we're going to go back and we're going to break down the word individual and the word atom. Okay, so individual, the etymology of the word individual, in means, the opposite of individual, right? It's got dual in it, so divide, right? So individual means it's something cannot be split. It is the, I guess, the most singular form of something. It is inseparable. You cannot split it into two. That is it. And the etymology of the word is derived from the Greek atomos, which is an atom, right? Because they believed that an atom was the smallest particle of matter and nothing is smaller than an atom. So atomos became individual, throughout the time. And so in our mind, when I say you are an individual, you are an individual, right? We get bolstered up, right? I am. I cannot be separated into anything else. I am one entity. Okay, now let's look at atom. Atom, once again, comes from Greek, atomos, meaning the smallest form of something. Yeah, and as we have been led to believe anyway, up until a certain point, I think before the 70s, people thought that, the 1970s, I believe, people thought that the atom was the smallest particle. And then they discovered something called subatomic particles. So it turns out when you break down an atom, you find things that are smaller than an atom. So it turns out, even though we believed or we thought for a long period of time that the atom was the smallest thing, right, was the individual, smallest bit of matter in existence, then we looked further and found, oh shit, we were wrong. And there's a proton, and then there's a neutron, and then there's electrons, and then there's quarks, and now there are vibrating strings, or string theory, right? So turns out an atom is not an individual after all. It is not indivisible after all. If you look further, an atom can and is broken down even further to subatomic particles. Okay, so, but you get a lot of confidence in the words, right? Oh, that's an atom. Yeah, and if a person just accepted that an atom could not be broken down further, then they would have failed to see the other things that comprised the atom, right? They wouldn't have even looked for, right, or thought to search for protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, and now strings. Yeah? So it blinds your mind and it forces you to perceive reality in a particular way that is not necessarily true, right? Is not necessarily representative of reality in itself. Now, let's go back to individual, right? An individual cannot be split into two. It is it is just you, and you are comprised of just you. Except if we look a bit further, that is not necessarily true, right? So if you take the individual, what is an individual? If I really look at it, even from a biological, perspective, what comprises an individual? You can say I am Tom or I am Ashley, but the fact of the matter is, what does that mean? What does I am mean, right? What is Ashley? What is Tom? Well, I am an individual, but are you though? Right? You think I have this personality, but do you though? I kind of glossed over this in the last episode and talk about it again. In split brain patients, when they've done experiments, they have found that left brain and the right brain are actually comprised of two separate identities. So if we're just looking just in the brain, and you can Google this, if we're looking just on a material, like a level of materialism, right? If you split a person, I think it's called I don't know what it's called, and I don't want to misstate this, but they have done experiments where they've separated, the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, and then they ask questions. There's a part of the brain that is nonverbal. So, but they ask it questions in split brain patients, and they find that one part of the brain responds differently than another part of the brain. So that's fun, right? So if you ask a person, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? The verbal part of the brain will say something like a race car driver, okay? Excuse me, I gotta adjust myself here in my chair. So the verbal person will say, okay, race car driver. And you think, oh, okay, that's fine. If you ask the nonverbal part of them, they will say something completely different, like a gardener or something like that. These are facts. So it turns out even on a material level, a person isn't an individual. They can be broken down further just on that level, right? There's a book I won't be able to remember it right now. You can see it's like on the tip of my tongue. It will come to me eventually, but it's experience. V.S. Ramachandran is the author, and it is, I think the book is called Phantoms of the Brain. And in it, they talked about people who had issues like with their brain, right? And one of them, there's this one sort of disorder where a person either can be detached from their own arm and feel like their arm is not part of their body, or they feel like it's a dead thing. Or the opposite, where like parts of their body like will attack them, right? So there was a lady who like her arm kept like trying to kill her. Her own arm kept trying to kill her. So what the fuck is that? Right. And it, there's a brilliant sort of introduction to that book where Ramachandran says, like, you learn about humanity not by studying what the status quo is, what is considered normative, but the outliers. Right. Because if it's possible for people in the outliers, then it can be possible for the rest of us. I'm paraphrasing here. So there's that too. You've got something happening there where if the brain is damaged in a particular way, a person can behave differently. So that idea of who you are and what you think you are, your persona, your personality, is standing on a foundation of sand, on the ocean, where something can happen, or you can even, there's a guy who, I think in the 40s or something, he suffered an experiment where a pipe or something went through his brain. Sorry for the visual. And he survived it, but it changed his entire personality. So that is just on a physical level. And then we are also, familiar with people who have like dissociative identity disorder, or it used to be called multiple personality disorder, where they can become different people, right? They can adopt different personalities. And not only that, their physical form will adapt to fit the personality of the individual, like the person, quote, individual persona that one body is adopting. So like you could have a personality, for example, who speaks differently, right? Or, can see. And then another personality that needs glasses. Like that happens. Okay. So that in itself, if we're looking at the outliers, to see, okay, there are human beings that are capable of doing this under whatever circumstances, right? This is possible. It's something that then it's possible for you under the wrong or right, depending on your perspective, sort of circumstances. So then it should apply to the rest of us, okay? So then you start thinking about these things. So then are you really an individual? Like the personality, the persona that you fight, what's called the ego, that you fight so hard to protect, what is that? Because another thing, so I say I just started doing a detox, okay? And also taking more probiotics and things of that nature, right? So I had a personality, right? I was exhibiting certain types of behavior at the earlier part of this week, right? But then by drinking teas and cutting out certain things out of my diet and taking, certain, antiparasitics or whatever, and consuming more probiotics, at the end of the week, I'm different, right? My mind is clearer. My mood is elevated. I am sort of more conscious and I'm slower to react, in that sense. I mean, I'm pretty slow to react, but this cleanse has like shifted me to another sort of level. Not only that, when I think I've hinted at this, but I'll repeat this as well. Maybe not hinted, but I've definitely stated it, that, people, there is bacteria in your gut, which is why I'm taking more probiotics, that lends itself to the production of more serotonin in your body, right? Good gut bacteria. And a lot of people who struggle with mood disorders may also have a shortage of these good bacteria in your gut. So let's just say something happened in your childhood. Maybe like you had an ear infection as a baby or as a kid, and you were prescribed antibiotics, right? And so then as a result of that, those antibiotics, killed all, the majority or a good chunk of good bacteria in your gut. Yeah. And as a result, your brain or whatever in your gut failed to produce the amount of serotonin that you need to function in a particular level. You will grow up thinking that, okay, you're just a sad person, or you're just a person that's predisposed to, depression or mood swings and all of that. Yeah. And then if you have issues with, other parasites, candida and things like that in your body, that can also affect your mood as well and your behavior as well. Now, to the world, your persona, people would describe you as, Ashley or Tom are, they're short tempered and things of that nature. And you will adopt that as, okay, this is just who I am. Okay, now imagine like in your 20s or 30s, you start discovering all this stuff that's going on and you decide to do a detox and start taking more probiotics. And somehow you find a good strain of probiotics that now is able to replenish all the good bacteria that you had lost or that were destroyed when you were a child. And now you become something else, right? You develop a different personality. And now people are like, wait, what happened to you? You used to be this, right? If just, microscopic organisms can completely change a person's behavior, and not just probiotics, but even like fungi, like mushrooms, or even, plants like cannabis, right? If something can change your personality that quickly, where the person who you identified as now all of a sudden becomes drastically different, or like, then who exactly are you? You're not a fixed persona. You're not a fixed form, right? If you're that changeable, then you aren't who you think you are, right? If it's that changeable. Does that make sense? You aren't who you think you are if it's that changeable. I should say, it makes no sense to be so strongly identified with a particular type of set of behaviors and say, well, I am this person. Are you? How are you that person if how you define yourself can be changed by the wrong or right set of circumstances? So I'm saying all that to set the first level. Pause and detach yourself from who you think you are. Because some people have gotten so wrapped up in who they think they are based on whatever set of behaviors that their body exhibits, depending on what they're eating, right? So you think you're this person, right? Well, that's just who I am. So you say something to a person, like let's say the person is temperamental or moody or, whatever it is. And you say, listen, you got to work on this, right? You have a short temper. You should work on that. Their response is, this is just who I am. No, it's not, right? That is not who you are. You are not a slave to a certain set of behaviors unless you accept that you are a slave to a certain set of behaviors, particularly when those set of behaviors can be altered and changed. I don't condone alcohol at all. In fact, I'm 100% opposed to it. However, if you give that same person alcohol, they're going to behave in a different way. Does that make sense? So I have a friend, for example, who says they feel like they have to drink to become more, open. And to me, that's weird, and not in a judgmental way. It's just you're acknowledging that you need something outside of yourself to shift what you are, right? But the thing is, why does it have to be alcohol, right? If alcohol can do it, then that means that this is something that you possess naturally. It's just this is something that you're using to kind of get it out of you, right? So that openness is something you possess naturally. And alcohol is just a crutch or whatever, or a tool that you're attempting to use to get a specific sort of action out of your body, okay? And I'm being very mindful of what I'm saying because I'm building up to something. I didn't say out of you. I said out of your body, okay? So then if that's the case, it is something that your body is capable of. The behavior that you're trying to bring out or elicit through the use of alcohol is something that you are naturally capable of, right? It's not that you're not. It's just you think or you believe that this particular thing is something that you can use to bring that out of you, but it doesn't have to be the case, right? It could be other things. You could be closed because of what's going on in your body, right? You could be closed because of, negative thought patterns, right? That you've sort of attached to, right? Maybe you're not meditating, you lack focus and things like that, or you're just listening to that voice in your head too much. And what alcohol does is suppress that, right? But if that's the case, then it's not, the alcohol that's helping you. It's the suppression of that voice in your head. So that means that the problem here is the voice in your head, right? So the one solution that you've chosen is, mushrooms or alcohol, or whatever it is, right? Marijuana, right? But the problem, the root cause of the issue is the voice in your head. So at the end of the day, when the effects of these drugs fade away, you're still going to have to deal with the fact that you keep listening to the voice in your head. Which, by the way, I'm taking it back to my point at the beginning of this episode, is how can you be an individual when even in your own mind, there is a duality happening there. If I don't have to explain to people every time I've said the voice in your head, most people react, fuck that voice in my head, because they know and they acknowledge that there's something in their mind that is a cause of conflict, right? I don't have to break down, I've never really said this to a person where they go, well, I don't have a voice in my head, right? What are you talking about, right? Most people do. And even the people who say, no, I don't have a voice in my head, to me, I feel like they're so identified with the voice in their head that there is not even space between its prompts and its suggestions, right? And its visuals and who they are as observers of that voice in their head. They're so identified with it that it doesn't even come as a voice. It is just a prompt, right? And then they're responding. So it's still there. It's just how much space between the observer and the voice is there. So an individual, now I've broken it down from a physical level. Now we're talking about like a auditory hallucination level, right? That voice in your head it's a voice. It is a voice. You cannot listen to what I'm saying right now and listen to the voice in your head simultaneously, which should tell you that you're clearly listening to it. You're listening to it with your ears, right? Or whatever sort of auditory sense that your brain is eliciting, because you cannot, that's why, if let's say your mind had drifted off this podcast and you had to bring your mind back to what I'm talking about. That's because what caused your mind to drift? Because you stopped listening to me so that you can listen to the voice in your head that you've sort of been hypnotized by over the years. And then you have to shake your head away from it so that you can shift your focus back to my voice so that you can listen to what I'm saying. If the voice in your head was you, why would you need to listen to it, right? It would be something that would just kind of come to you instinctively or intuitively. You would just know. But if you have to shift focus away from listening to me or an audiobook or even your own fucking mantra, if you meditate, to listen to this voice, if this voice is talking to you and distracting you from shit that you need to do or causing you to suffer, right? Or it's causing you pain or it's making you anxious. But in order for it to cause all of these things, you have to actively be listening to it. Something else is going on in your mind. There's two. There is you, the observer, that's listening, right? That's shifting the focus from the voice in your head to let's say my voice. And then there's this voice, right? That clearly isn't aligned with what you desire, what you being the awareness wants, because there's constant conflict, because constantly listening to that voice or just reacting to its prompts, right? Its visualizations and things like that is a source of suffering. Okay? It causes your consciousness to suffer. Now, I've theorized that, that voice could be a non-corporeal entity or whatever from an ultimate, alternate dimension or whatever. But it could also very well be of a physical cause where maybe we're all there's some sort of parasite that affects the mind, that affects the brain. Yeah, look at it both ways. Whatever it is, it's parasitical, right? That was where I was at least up until this episode. But I'm going to flip it. Right? But whatever it is, it's something that's sort of parasitic, right? That was the sort of where my mind was going, okay? And it causes us to suffer, more or less, right? That's what I thought until I started reading a little book called I Am Not the Body. And the author of I Am Not the Body is Sri, that's S-R-I, Nisargadatta Maharaj. Now, if you just search for Sri Maharaj, Maharaj. It should pop up. If you just search I am not the body and then Sri Maharaj, it should pop up. And it says talks on non-duality by one of the greatest spiritual teachers. Okay. Now, I read this book, I think 5 times now in the span of 2 days, because it has just blown my mind. And by listening to it, it caused me to flip my understanding of what I think is really going on. Okay, so I'm about to break it down to you guys as clearly and concisely as I can possibly do so at this point in time. Not to say I will not revisit this in the future, because I probably will, because this is the first time I've thought about it in this way, and it is fucking phenomenal. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to put it on TikTok in a 60-second clip. I don't know if I can. But I don't want to limit myself either. But I wanted to talk about it here because at least I don't have the time constraints. But here it goes. I'm going to take a few steps out of the way to get to where I'm going. Okay? You've got the voice in your head, and then you have you, the listener. Okay? Now, which one are you? Right? Up until a certain point, right? Up until, let's say, you stumbled across this podcast or whatever. You thought that voice in your head was you. And so that's why you listen to it. But the intent, obviously, of this podcast and others, like others I've said this to you as well. They've said that ego, you've got to kill the ego. That voice in your head, they've called it the ego. Eckhart Tolle called it the parasitic pain body, right? So we've come up with all these labels to define and describe this thing, right? So on some level, we are acknowledging that there's something else along with us for the ride, which should tell you then you are not an individual. Your persona isn't fixed, right? In order for you to behave in a particular way, your brain has to be healthy, right? Your gut has to be balanced, right? Your hormones have to be balanced, right? In order for you to be one person. And I can go in with chemicals or drugs or, not parasitic, but microscopic organisms and change who you think you are, in a very short amount of time, which should tell you then you are a sum of moving parts, right? You can be broken down, right? You can be broken down, especially if you are identified with form. You can be broken down to, okay, you're Ashley, but Ashley is also, serotonin, dopamine, right? Oxytocin, right? If I removed all of the good bacteria out of your body, like Ashley's behavior is going to be drastically different. Yeah. If we split I believe it's called the corpus callosum. But if we split that, right, now what's going to be prevalent is, there's 2 different personalities happening here. So just like the atom, when people believed that the atom was all that there is, up until really recently, when they realized, oh shit, no, it can be broken down even further. I'm saying, okay, and I've been saying just in different ways, okay, you are not an individual, right? You've got all of these things that could be altered to comprise who you think and believe you are. Okay, so if that's the case, then that whole I am an individual and I've got to protect myself is bullshit, because at the end of the day, you're not. And I can come in, right, with a set of drugs or a set of, microscopic organisms like a plant fungi or I'm sorry, like a plant or a fungi rather, and alter who you think you are by introducing, because when you take probiotics, you're putting bacteria in your body. So by introducing other, quote, individual, right, bacteria into your body. And the probiotics don't go away. They stay in your system. So that's what probiotics is. Like, I know we kind of detach ourselves from it, but at the end of the day, we're putting different species of bacteria in our body in order to get the unit to perform in a particular way. Same thing with, magic mushrooms. That's a fungi that you're putting in your body to alter your body's behavior. It's not an inert substance. It's not dead. It's an intelligence, right? These are life forms that you're putting in your body to basically comprise the individual. So you're not an individual. None of us are. Even if you're looking just on the physical, none of us are, because you can be broken down further. And I'm just talking about, because I'm not going to stop at the materialist approach, right? I'm just talking about your physical form, okay? So if you're that alterable, how does it make sense? Not only just that to affect your mood or whatever, but as you age and start to break down, right? Now you believe that you're dying. Oh, I'm sick. No, your body's sick. This person's dying. No, their body is dying. I've said before, and I guess I just did not say it with enough conviction, so I'm going to say it again, and that's this episode, right? The voice in your head is the Siri, right? It's the voice of Alexa, right? In your smart Echo speaker, your spying Echo speaker, and your iPhone. It is programmed with the body, but you are not Siri. You are using the body. Okay. So now, along with that book that I just mentioned, I would strongly recommend it. I also was playing with some writings by Mahar Baba, and he was talking about, this one I don't really strongly recommend because there's just not a lot of good writings out there that I've been able to sort of grab my hands on. But if you're interested, if it sounds interesting, Mahar Baba is his name. I think you can find a PDF of it. But I've heard this phrase before, so I'll echo it. And I just wanted to tell you where I got it from. The first book, I Am Not the Body, I strongly recommend, please read that. You're going to want to by the time this podcast is done, I hope. But he said, Mahar Baba, I'm probably messing up his name, but he said, death is like taking off an old coat. So I read that. And then I read I Am Not the Body. And in I Am Not the Body, he went in on that concept. And it's just repeating the same shit. You're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. And I've said it before. But then, I never really moved past that label. What does it mean? So this is what I'm going to break shit down to you guys today so that when you come away from this, you go, I hope anyway, you go, whoa, wait a minute. Okay? So this is a compilation of all of the episodes that have, preceded this one. Okay? We say, I am not the body. Right? But I feel like it's a label. It's just something that we say to just sort of allow us to be aware that we are conscious at some level, okay? But then we don't really delve deeper into what that means, and that's what I'm going to do. So it's a few things. I'm going to say it again. Death is like taking off an old coat. So I'm going to start with this premise. Imagine you had a cotton t-shirt, okay? So you put on a cotton shirt, yeah? And then you're walking around, okay? You're just wearing a shirt, okay? And then people go, oh, that's a nice shirt. But you're not a shirt, right? So you don't really, thank you for the compliment, but it's something that at the end of the day, you're going to take off and put on another one. So it doesn't really move you in any way. And if you spill something on the shirt, or it gets damaged in a way, you're not so attached to the shirt. Yes, maybe you wear the shirt every day. It is what it is. Or so you think anyway. I have other theories on what happens when we dream. Are we, playing other lives along with the one that we're presently conscious of right now? Probably. Okay, so you think this is the only shirt that you have, right? So when somebody compliments you on the shirt, you go, you still go, okay, listen, thank you. Because if something happens to it and it gets destroyed, let's say it's a uniform. Let's not even say it's a shirt. Let's just say it's a uniform that you wear to work. So you have to wear it every day. It's not a big deal. Sometimes it gets stained, but you try to keep it clean because it's your only one for right now. But should something happen to it, you can get a new one. So you're not really attached to it. You take care of it because it costs money or whatever, but you're not oh shit, I just ripped, if my uniform gets destroyed, then I'm dead. I'm gone and I will never exist again. No, it's just a uniform. Okay. I want you to think really fucking deeply as to what that means. Take the same thing and apply it to a car. Cars are expensive, right? I drive a Jeep, okay? I make payments on it, okay? I love my Jeep. But if somebody goes, oh, you have a nice car, I'm not identified with my Jeep. I don't think I'm a Jeep, right? I just say, oh, thank you, and I keep it moving, yeah? Awareness there's space and separation. So even when my Jeep has its voice for the navigation system and OnStar and everything else like that, when it talks, I don't think I'm OnStar, right? I don't think I'm the voice of my navigation. There's space there where I go, this is a vehicle, and I'm just operating in it, and I'm utilizing it to do something that I can't physically do as a human being, which is go 120 miles per hour. I'm not driving 120 miles per hour, but that's what it's capable of, right? So your brain is the same thing. It is capable of a lot. But for the most part, like it's like your car. Your car is capable of going 120 miles per hour, right? But for the most part, you keep it right around 70 or 80 because it cannot run. Like if you're just, first of all, it's against the law. Two, unless you're like in Germany. Two, if you run your car every day at those high speeds, it breaks down the car, right? The longevity of your car, the parts and things like that over time. Apply that same mindset. It breaks down your engine over time. Applying that same mindset to the human brain. They say we only use a certain percentage of the brain, right? But that's because yes, you could unlock it. And I think a lot of people do unlock it. A lot of people who are capable of things like, telepathy or an ESP and, astral projection and all of that, and these are real. Google it. They're unlocking certain functions in their brain. But, for the most part, you don't, to function in this world, this is just like a base level, like speed limit, which is where most people kind of function in. Okay. So I say all that to say this: death is like taking off your an old coat. Your body is an old coat. Your body is a coat, right? And as it ages, you don't age. Okay. Now you've heard all of this before, but you're sort of like, yeah, okay, I get it. Right. But I'm going to say it again, but I'm going to say it in a different way because this is what flipped shit for me. Okay. So hear me out. Listen here. Okay. In the previous episode, I talked about parasitic entities and I talked about maybe we're the aliens. I'm going to say it again. Okay? Let's talk about reincarnation. Okay? Right. So a person, these are facts, right? A person can die, or I should say leave their body. Yeah. And then jump to a new body. Right? And then remember who they were in a past life. Okay, I don't think we think deeply on what the implications of that is if you fully accept that you're literally something that's just jumping from body to fucking body, okay? You can say all day, I'm not the body, but then when you still look in the mirror, you look and you go, oh, okay, but, I'm this thing. You're fucking not. Because reincarnation, because astral projection, because at the end of the day, it's just the body, right? When you leave your body, when you die, people who have had near-death experiences, same thing. There's something that leaves the body. That's what you are. You're this thing. We're not human. We're inhuman. I'm gonna say it again, because this is what fucked my brain. Because I've said all of this stuff, but it didn't really settle into my brain until I flipped my perspective. If there's something that can jump from body to body, right? So you can remember your past life. I used to be this person, or right? People just say that I used to be this person. What is the I then? Because there's some people who believe that they used to be Cleopatra and now they're, Tom Jones or whatever. Okay, fine. But what is I? Because you're not Cleopatra. You basically operated the body of Cleopatra. But you're not Cleopatra. Do you guys remember, I don't know if you ever watched Stargate. If you haven't, it'd be worth watching just the first episode of the movie. There was a species called the Goa'uld, and they were parasites, yeah? And they would attach to human bodies. And then they were technologically advanced, and so they were worshipped as God. Okay? When we watch shows like this, we sort of watch them from a defensive perspective where we think, okay, That's, that's an entity. Those are aliens. And we never flip it. So I'm going to flip it. Like, what if we're the fucking goa'uld? What if consciousness is the parasite? I'm going to say it again. And it has a negative connotation to it because of the word parasite. But think about it. What if our consciousness really is that non-corporeal entity that has hijacked, these Homo sapiens sapiens? So I saw a TikTok yesterday that said, 300,000 years of that mankind has existed in the present form that we are in right now. Same brain, same culture, behavior, things of that nature. 300,000 years. But we only have, let's say, like approximately like 10,000 or less than. So there's like a huge chunk of time that is unaccounted for, relatively unaccounted for, or not even understood. Okay? So there's that. Now, you have the Homo sapiens sapiens or whatever. That's the body. Yeah. And they say, we evolved from apes or whatever. And then some people believe that aliens came down and messed with, the human body to create the Homo sapiens sapiens. But nobody really says what that is. They always project it out, right, as like, oh, it's the, it is the, I forget what the word is right now. It'll come to me. But they always say it's aliens, right? And my thing is, like, what if we're the fucking aliens? I said it before, but like I need you guys to think about it. What if consciousness is a parasitic life form, right? Or a non-corporeal entity. So I've always projected it outwards, right? When I talk about Star Trek, a race of non-corporeal entities that, take over bodies, right? In that Star Trek episode that I referenced, where there was a species that had evolved past bodies, but then they wanted to take over bodies. And we keep projecting it outwards, and we never pause and think that maybe it's fucking us. Like, it's us. It is us. Because you would have to be something that is not human. You can't say, I'm not my body, but without also acknowledging that then that means that you're not human. You're not human. Who you really are, consciousness is not human. Consciousness is something else. Like, I've joked about, like, on my TikTok, say, like, we're all ghosts. But I don't think people think deeply about what that fucking means. Because even when you think of a ghost, you still think of something that holds on to the physical form of the body that it used to inhabit. But no. Like the show Behind Her Eyes, it showed little lights. That's what we are. When I don't want to spoil this, but when they would leave their bodies, it would show lights. One was purple, one was green or whatever. It would show lights. Now, people, when they talk about they've seen aliens, they also define it as orbs. But once again, we're so busy projecting outwards. We're going, no, those are the aliens. We don't pause and think like, let's put it all together. That's us. My husband and I kind of talk, and he goes like, what do you think we look like, outside of this world, And you're tempted to envision something still corporeal. But if it's a species of intelligence that invades corpses, which is what your body is, it's just a corpse, and hijacks corpses, then you would not be a corpse, right? You're not a fucking car, right? Let's say I was identified as a Jeep. Okay, and I was just driving around as a Jeep. I'm incapable of seeing my physical form, right? And I'm using a Jeep to serve a purpose that I cannot normally serve in my regular body. If somebody were like pull up to me and go, hey, what do you think you really are? I would be tempted to imagine like, oh, well, maybe I'm a tractor, right? Or maybe I'm a beetle, like a VW beetle, right? You wouldn't think, no, you would have to be something completely different from a vehicle because that's why you're utilizing this vehicle. Like that thought doesn't cross our mind. We still, when we think about, even if you're like enlightened and woke, you still conceptualize, oh, you've got to be this other like formative humanoid thing. But like, let's put it all together. I've talked about, okay, could fungi be, intelligence or hold intelligence. Hold intelligence. They have said that plants have their own intelligence, hold intelligence, right? So I mentioned in the past episode, people in the Amazonian forest, finding the exact sort of combination of plants that they would, take to make ayahuasca release DMT in the brain. And when they were asked, how did you guys know? They say, well, the plant tells us. The plants told us, okay? And then I looked up, can you reincarnate as a dog? Right? People believe, oh, yes, you can reincarnate as a dog. Okay, cool. So and we even joke, like if you're a dick and you have bad karma, you will reincarnate as a dung beetle. Clearly, we are subconsciously sending messages to ourselves as to say, like, we're just, who we really are basically entities that like to kind of jack other life forms, right? That inhabit other life forms. I'm going to say it again. Who we really are then. You're not a human, but you're also not a bug. But you're also not a fucking reptilian, right? I did a TikTok, and it was like random, thoughts of the week. And one of the thoughts that I had was, could you reincarnate as a reptilian? And a lot of people were like, I never thought about it like that. Well, yeah, because no matter how woke and conscious you are, you're still identified, even though you know that you're not the body, even though you know that you're conscious or that you're consciousness, there's still a part of you that is so attached to the body that the thought of, well, wait, could I be a reptilian doesn't cross your mind, right? We just think that they are other. But if you can reincarnate as a fucking dung beetle, if that's a thing, or you can reincarnate as a dog, why wouldn't you be able to reincarnate a reptilian? They're humanoids. And the you being what you really are, which goes to say then that essentially who we really are, what consciousness really is, has to be some sort of life form that is obviously non-corporeal, and its function is that it can manipulate, right, and sort of hijack physical forms and utilize them as vehicles to experience the material world. That is who we really are. We are the parasites. And I don't mean that in a negative form, but that's what consciousness is. And you aren't the body, but also it means that then you aren't, the voice in your head, which we know. And if there's that grappling happening where it's saying all this stuff to you and then you're fighting with it, well, maybe it's fighting with you because you're not in its, you're not where, you've hijacked the fucking body, right? You are in the body. You're not the body. You're in the body. And everything from the Vedic, scriptures from thousands of years ago to what more and more people are starting to say is, okay, I'm not the body just a vehicle. I need you to think deeply about what the fuck that means. We keep saying, and I've been kind of guilty of that, like knowing stuff on a level where it's like, okay, I'm not the body, and I know when I die, like a part of me is still gonna go on. Who I am is still gonna go on, and then just stopping there. Right? That's where we stop. We go, okay, I'm not the body. That's cool. And we use that as a comfort because we're so strongly like programmed in our reality that, okay, like when you die, that's it. When your form dies, that's it. Because we're so identified with form. This is a madness. Okay? This is a madness. So let's look on a religious level. There's no religion that doesn't espouse that after you die, some part of you goes on. And obviously that some part of you is who the fuck you are, okay? So there's no religion that doesn't state this, right? So let's start with that. Now, more and more, like scientists are saying, like, no, consciousness begets matter, right? That the brain is not what's producing consciousness. It's the other way around. It's consciousness that affects matter. So before there was matter, before there was a body, there was you. But you put, so everybody's saying the same truths, but they're just saying it in different ways. And most people aren't thinking about it beyond, oh, okay, cool. Like when I die, like I'm still going to be around. Okay. But I'm like, really, like, I'm going to beat this over the head. Okay. Because this is important. Like, we really need to think about it. If you can remember your past life, or even if you can't, if you just feel like this is not your first rodeo, because it's not, okay? So I was like, I've said I was an Indian man in the UK, maybe alive in like the 40s or 30s or whatever it is, right? And I also have to acknowledge that when I say that, instead of stopping at I was, delving into that further, moving beyond the label and saying, okay, no, it's not even that I was. It like literally approach it as I wore the vehicle, body. I wore the body. I inhabited the body, like the gold. Okay, so go watch Stargate, but flip it. Not, okay, alien life forms, because that's everything in this world. If you're really looking for the truth, this is a world that's like a fucking mirror universe. Flip everything. Like, that's how things start to kind of make sense. Start flipping everything. Even like when you see things in media, like flip everything, reverse everything. Because usually like that's where you'll find the truth. Okay. So for example, like a court jester, it was only the court jester that was able to tell the truth to the king. He said it in jest, but it was often true. Okay. And in our society right now, a lot of truths, a lot of lies come from the sources that we believe should be telling us the truth. And then a lot of truths come from sources that we believe are just meant to entertain. And so we dismiss it, right? But it's packaged like that intentionally. And even in the things that are entertainment, you still have to even flip it beyond that. Okay? Like, so for example, people have this like genuine fear of like, if I say reptilians, it's like, well, reptilians are evil. It's like, well, because you've been programmed to think that they're evil. But imagine that, not even imagine, pause and think that if they are real, right? Reptilian humanoids, let's say, I've never met one, I don't fucking know. But let's just say that they are real. Let's just say that they live within the earth, right? The subterranean, colonies of species, which is absolutely fucking possible. You don't know just because they haven't told you, right? Who are you waiting to tell you, right? People who have gaslighted us or gaslit us for like, hundreds of years. Like, I don't expect them to tell us the truth. Okay. So just keep your mind open to the possibility that there could be shit going on literally right under our noses that we will not be made privy to because the powers that be need us to perceive reality in a particular way. Okay. So open up your mind to the fact that there could be, subterranean species living within, not like the earth is hollow. I'm not saying that, but in like below us, subterranean, like we have deep underground military bases that go 2-3 miles down. Okay. So they could be 2-3 miles down, 4 miles down or whatever, living their own sort of life, right? Their own sort of culture. Okay. And then let's say that their programming is telling us that we're fucking crazy, right? That we just bomb the fuck out of each other, which would be really easy to do. Like, look at our shit. You know what I mean? Like, if they are, let's say they're much more advanced than we are. So let's start with the premise that, yes, there could be a civilization of, let's say, reptilians that live, below the surface, subterranean colonies. Let's just say that could be possible. You don't know. Where are these stories coming from? I don't know. Okay. But they're there. I'm not going to outright dismiss it because at the end of the day, I don't fucking know. Okay. 2, if they're able to keep themselves sort of like away from our knowledge, they're probably much more advanced than we are. So let's just say that they are technologically more advanced than we are. Okay. 2. 3, they probably have access to our media. Okay. And they probably watch us and our news and see the way we treat each other. And they probably think we're fucking crazy apes. Right? Like just insane apes, right? And then, of course, there are those of them who are more conscious, just like us, more conscious, more aware, and are aware of the fact that, okay, there are conscious humans, or I should say there are humans who have, where their consciousness is much more, prevalent. So they haven't been dominated or blinded by, or that so identified with the ego that they've lost understanding of who they really are. Okay, I'm gonna need you to rewind that and repeat it. Okay, so they're probably just like us, right? There's evil ones, and there's probably like ones that are just trying to like, live their lives, and then there are ones that are seekers just like us, because at the end of the day, right, that otherness, that bullshit that the media does where they want other things, right? If consciousness is not your physical form, if consciousness is not limited to, okay, a human being or a dog or a dung beetle, right? And, or if you subscribe to pantheism, where consciousness is in everything, then clearly they would be just like us. And more importantly, the consciousness that is in you right now, the awareness, the one that's listening to the voice, right? The one that's going to go on after you die, can very well just as easily inhabit the body of a reptilian. I'm going to say that again. The consciousness of who you really are, right? What you really are, that orb, right? In behind the eyes, right? The one that astral projects, right? The thing that's not confined to the body. Who you really are can just as easily reincarnate, embody a reptilian as it can a human body. You really got to detach from identification with the form. Like we've heard it say, if you're listening to this podcast, like you're with me. I don't know too many people who are going to sit and listen to me for an hour unless you're really like vibrating on the same wavelength rather, as I am, right? So even think about it. Like, so there's some people who they cannot fathom that they could have embodied, or they could have reincarnated as a different gender or a different sex in a previous life. Right? So some people, it's like, oh, wait, what? You used to be a man. Like, why is that so fucking hard to conceptualize for some people? If my consciousness can inhabit a female body, why wouldn't it inhabit a male body? Or if my consciousness can inhabit a black woman's body, why would it be fucking limited to like just black females, right? Like, that's not how that works. My guess is you just take whatever body is, either available or what experiences you're trying to have. So I could very well have been. I mean, I am driven to Eastern philosophy in a way that my upbringing I had no exposure to that. And yet I spoke about these things even as a young child, and I would draw women in like the Victorian, era, gowns and things of that nature. Where is that coming from without any exposure to that? And I would speak to my mom about England, and I'd never been. So I always felt like I was like alive, around like that time period. And maybe I died, as an old man in, like I said, like the 1940s or whatever, who knows? But it's not like, it's just a fucking body, right? If you can drive a Jeep, you can drive a Prius. So and if you can drive a Prius, you can drive, you're not limited in any way, shape, or form. So you got to really start opening your mind, right? But for some people, even conceptualizing that your soul isn't what you see in the mirror and is not limited to just, one particular physical form. Like, we believe it and we hear it and we have it and we grasp it in theory, but then we stop beyond that thinking. And I'm like pushing you forward, pushing you past that. Like, if you can imagine, or you can pull ideas from who you were in the past, right? Then you can also pull references and behavior from who you are in the future, or more importantly, not who you are, but the physical body that your your consciousness, which is not limited by time, right? Your consciousness is not limited by time. It also is not limited to the physical form that you're inhabiting, clearly. So if a person can remember their past lives, like in that show, Surviving Death, those two boys, right? You can also recollect, pull information from your future incarnations as well. Okay? So stop limiting yourself. So to pull it back to reptilians, right? We are sort of programmed and have been primed to think of those, they're evil. Okay? But that's also kind of what the media and the news have primed us to think from the West about, people in the Middle East, like, oh, they're all, terrorists or whatever, right? Until people started becoming more sort of conscious and awake and aware, like, no, these are people who are protecting their fucking land, right? So just keep shit like that in mind, okay? So are they all, evil? Are reptilians all evil? I doubt it. Like, if they exist, my guess is they're probably just like us, right? And in the sense of they are probably, consciousness that is struggling to kind of take control of, the urges of the body that consciousness is presently existing in. And some of them will be successful at it and some of them won't. Or, same that applies to us. Right. And there are some of them who will be seekers, who will be awake, who probably take mushrooms or whatever, the kind of drugs that they have that works for them. And then there's some of them who are just like, shitty or whatever. But and we will define them as shitty. But at the end of the day, it's like the people we call shitty here are also the people who are so identified with the ego of the body that their consciousness is inhabiting, that they have been lost to that identity. Okay. So now let's break down what that identity is. Let's break down what ego is. Okay. So imagine that it is a race we are a race of, like, I don't want to say we are the race of parasitic life forms. But I'm saying that to shock you out of like a particular point of thinking. Like, let's imagine we are the gold. Okay. But instead of a physical parasite, like a worm, right? It's actually like those orbs, like, let's say from behind our eyes. You can Google it just to see, or just the orbs that people report glowing, right? They see or whatever. Like, maybe that's us. That's what we really are. We are non-corporeal life forms. I think if you search non-corporeal life forms, you'll probably see the orbs that I'm referring to. Or whatever. So let's just say that that's what we are. Okay. And then what we do is we sort of transfer or attach ourselves to, different physical forms. And then your job, right? I've said Earth is a base level simulation, but your job here is, can you tame the beast? Right? How can you soothe the beast? Right? What is the beast? Well, it's the ape body. It's the Homo sapien that, we can't find the missing link because there is no missing link. I think if you want to really think, on a weird sort of open-minded though mindset, is that, maybe, consciousness sort of decided, or collective consciousness came to Earth, and just decided, okay, we're going to kind of mess with the DNA of, like, these life forms, right? These apes or whatever, and then we're going to change their DNA in a way, and all of a sudden, like, heads started getting smaller, right? No hair, right? And then we're now walking on all twos, which causes back problems or whatever, but it is what it is. But they have said that scientists have said that there appears to be some evidence of, like, like, I don't want to say outright just say, genetic manipulation, but they're certainly saying that, like, a lot of, DNA, it doesn't come from here. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so look up like panspermia or whatever. I don't want to get too far off track. But so something happened, and now you had, what used to be like even a Cro-Magnon or a Neanderthal or whatever has been kind of refined now to the forms that we are presently inhabiting right now. Okay. And every religion talks about breathing in, like God breathing in into man. Okay, so that's a recurrent theme as well. But to me, if you switch your perspective and think of God as a collective consciousness, right, and then think of that breathing in as a more of a analogy for, like, individual, here's that word again, because an individual, even an individual consciousness is still part of a collective. So you're not an individual. Nothing is individual. But even an individual of a consciousness, an individual consciousness is still part of a collective, right? Has been sort of uploaded. Think of it as being uploaded into these different physical forms. But the nature of the beast is like, look at a gorilla in the wild. Here's a great analogy. I'm going to use two analogies to kind of explain what I'm trying to say here. To break it down, let's give you some visuals, okay? Two things. First, there was a video, I think Soledad O'Brien posted it yesterday. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. It was these two cats. And it's not her original video, but the tag was that the lady said, the lady who uploaded the video said, my cats are useless, okay? So you've got these two cats, and they're looking at this mouse, and the mouse is literally running up to the fucking cats on two legs and like presenting itself to the cats. And the cats are just looking at the mouse like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, and they won't attack the mouse. They're looking at the mouse. You know, and the cat is like running from one cat to another. I mean, if you could put a narrative on there, it was like the cat is saying, fucking eat me, like eat me, you know? And the cats are like, nah, man, what the fuck are you doing? This is weird. You know what I mean? Like, this is fucking weird, okay? Now, everybody in the comments were saying like, oh, yeah, these cats are stupid, yada, yada, yada. And I left my little dinky comment that probably nobody read. But I said, like, look, Toxoplasmosis gondii. I mentioned this I mentioned this parasite so many times, but that to me, I looked at that video. Things aren't always what they fucking seem. So I look at that video and I see a cat looking at a mouse that's behaving in a way that it should not be behaving. And the cat understandably going, hey, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to put whatever the fuck is making you act like that in my fucking body. And the fact that neither cat reacted to that mouse should tell you that, no, there's an intelligence going on here. Something else is going on beyond what our minds can see, right? Or our own ignorance tells us. That mouse should not have been behaving like that. And it was triggering something in the instincts of the cats to not consume that. So those are actually very intelligent cats, assuming I'm right, and that mouse was infected by Toxoplasmosis gondii. I talked about this in a previous episode. I said there is a parasite that hijacks the nervous system of a mouse and makes it, a mouse or a rat, and makes it go up to a cat so that it can be eaten by the cat. And the reason why, and the parasite is called Toxoplasmosis gondii. And the reason why it does that is so that it can allow for, because it's like a next stage of its evolution or whatever. It needs to do that in a cat's body. It needs to do that in a cat's body. So it makes the mouse behave in a way that it's counterproductive or counterintuitive to its own needs, to basically present itself to the cat so the cat will eat it. Okay? So that was what's going on there. Now, here's the thing. From the mouse's perspective, let's talk about what's going on in the mouse's brain, in the mouse's mind. Okay? The mouse ate something that contained the spore of this parasite or whatever it is. I don't, not a spore, but whatever it's called, right? That contained this parasite. Okay? Now, the way a lot of these parasites work, specifically like the cordyceps parasite that I mentioned a couple episodes ago, the way that it works is that it hijacks the nervous system of the host, so to speak. So cordyceps, the one that hijacks the ant and then like makes it leave its colony and go down to the forest floor and then stay like underneath leaf or whatever. So that eventually, after consuming the ant from the inside, it bursts out of the head of the ant as a fully formed mushroom. Okay? It doesn't do that by, like, they call it zombie ants or whatever. It does that not by taking over the mind of the ant, so to speak, but by hijacking its nervous system. Okay? Now let's look at what's going on, what could be going on theoretically in the minds of both the mouse in question, Toxoplasmosis mouse, infected mouse, and then the cordyceps infected ant. Okay, imagine the ant has a personality. All right, has its own sort of voice in its head, right? And it's just doing ant things, and it wants to just hang out in its colony and do whatever ants do. Yeah, it's performing its function, and then it gets infected by this thing, and all of a sudden, it's walking towards a forest floor, away from its friends and stuff like that. obviously, in the mind of the ant, there's going to be a conflict, right? There's going to be an ant that's saying, no, I should do this. I need to be doing this. I need to protect myself. I gotta, like however an ant's mind functions, instinctively, that doesn't go away. Okay? But now you've got something that has hijacked the nervous system of the ant, and it's making it it's taking over its body, and it's making it behave in a different way, right? What's happening? What's happening in the mind of the ant? You're still going to have, a conflict there, because built into the DNA of the ant are a certain set of behaviors, right? If this happens, I need to react in this way. If this happens, I need to react in this way. But once let's say, consciousness of the parasite hijacks the nervous system of the ant, there's going to be conflict there. You guys get where I'm going with this? I know you get where I'm going with this, okay? And that's where you have it. So now all of a sudden the ant wants to behave in a particular way. And maybe at first it might be successful, but eventually when you see it break away from certain patterns of behavior, you know that on some level anyway, the consciousness of the parasite has fully or is beginning to gain control of the nervous system of the ant until it's completely sort of like overtaken and then becomes something else. That is what's happening. Look around you. Okay, so they say our closest ancestor, quote, ancestor is a chimp. Yeah, but if you believe that, right? But let's just say that that's true. If you look at the way a consciousness infected ape, which is what we are, I'm saying that that's what we are. Okay, if you look at the way a consciousness infected ape behaves, which is Homo sapiens sapien, it is divergently different from an ape, right? In the wild, right? Like we're painting, we're using electronics, right? We're not behaving, right, in a way that's typical of what our DNA demands it, or how our DNA demands that we behave. However, there's still instinctive behaviors that are, sort of programmed and primed into the DNA, into the body, into the mind of this Homo sapiens sapien that consciousness has to grapple with, right? So, for example, that, need to consume, copious amounts of foods that have energy, like energy storage. So you'll see some human beings struggle with that and obviously have issues with their weight. Even though their consciousness knows, okay, this is not healthy to consume copious amounts of sugars and fats or whatever, the brain, just like the ant, right? The brain of the Homo sapiens sapien has a certain set of instinctive behaviors that is programmed in its DNA that causes that fight, so to speak. But you, consciousness, are more intelligent, and you're trying to steer the collective of the Homo sapiens sapiens that have been hijacked by the parasitic consciousness, right, to a particular function, right? Which is where, as a whole, we're sort of going towards. Problems or not that we have, that's what's happening. But you're still sort of going to have this behavior, right? So even like promiscuity and all of that, like we're trying to like sort of get rid of that. Some people are, but then that's something that, like, that's not a thing in the wild. It is what it is. You seek out, a female seeks out the biggest, strongest male. Like that is still happening. But there's conflict there because consciousness is in a form that it is not native to. And it's trying to get it to behave in a different way. And eventually, as humanity becomes more and more conscious, which is basically why people keep reincarnating, because what we're trying to do, and by we, I don't mean the human race, I mean the consciousness, the collective consciousness is trying to, quote, evolve. I'm just saying this because I don't have a better choice of words, so if you're offended, I apologize. Everybody gets offended now, so just for you who know what I'm trying to say, like, thank you for saying with me. But we're trying to evolve the Homo sapiens sapiens into something that is more conscious and less ape. So that is why more and more, as time progresses, you will see the collective becoming more and more conscious. They call it the Great Awakening. And no, it's It's like that ant, right? Over time, consciousness starts to kind of grab and figure out ways to grasp a hold of the mind of the ant. And I don't want to say subdue it, but basically get it to behave in the way that is conducive towards its propagation of its species. And I think that is what is happening here. And I think that what that voice in your head is the mind of the Homo sapien sapien and the DNA that's contained within that. And the reason why we grapple with it, we're fighting with it, is because, we're like the cordyceps parasite, right? And there's this sort of fight. And so for some people, your consciousness becomes more successful at it over time. And for some, they kind of lose to it. They fail at domesticating the beast, or I keep using the parasite analogy. It's like the fungi failing to completely take over the body of the ant, right? For whatever reason, maybe its immune system kicks it out or whatever. But that's what's happening with us. I'm positing that's what happened. That is what is happening with us. And so the reason why you have to keep coming back, putting it all together, this is my big theory of everything. The reason why we have to keep coming back, sometimes even to the same life, is because you're really, as a collective, our goal as a collective of consciousness is to subdue the Homo sapiens. Remember, you're not the human being. You're the orb. You really have to start seeing yourself as a non-corporeal entity, capable, like a stack, capable of taking on. We're all saying the same things in different ways, capable of taking on different forms. So that's not what you are. You're a shapeshifter. Come on. Like if you're saying that, when you die, you're going to go on to heaven or whatever, or you're saying that we are, consciousness produces the brain, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, that's what scientists are saying, consciousness produces the brain, cannot be found in the brain, then clearly consciousness is something else, right? So I think that the collective is sort of trying to essentially shape, hijack and shape the Homo sapiens and maybe even reptilians, I don't know, towards a particular type of world, maybe like that is similar to the world that we left. So at the end of last week's episode, if you haven't listened to it, please do. I talked about that. I said the book that I mentioned was by Michio Kaku. And I think I attributed that quote to parallel worlds, but I think it was actually the future of humanity that I meant, where he talked about wormholes and being able to pass, like non-corporeal entities can pass through wormholes and then start a new civilization. It might have been one of those two books. I got to go back and reread it. So just FYI. And I'm saying I'm doubling down really and saying that is what is happening. That's what's happening. Let's say, I think he called it was it the big freeze at the end of the future of humanity, Michio Kaku? But something happened in the world that our consciousness originated from, right? And then we came through in a wormhole, and we sent not the bodies, but we figured out a way to separate our consciousness from the body, which is what we're going to do here. So clearly it's a loop. So we figured out a way to separate our consciousness from our body and then send our consciousness through a wormhole to this world. And now we're essentially in the process of terraforming this planet. We're the aliens and not human beings, right? But consciousness is the alien. Consciousness is what is alien. That's what I'm saying. Okay? Now, when you have the battle kind of going back and forth, you got the voice in your head. You got to think about it as the voice in your head. They've said it. It's the ego. It's the persona. Well, double down on what that means. Really think deeply on what that means. It means that it is the mind. They call it the reptilian brain or whatever it is. But grasp what that means. It means that the body has its own mind. You're the one who's the fucking invader. And what you're attempting to do is to get it to behave in a particular way so that it suits you. Think about it like the old Hindu texts talk about this. They compared it to a horse, a chariot and a horse, right? So you get a horse in the wild and the horse wants to behave in a particular way, right? And you have to, over time, sort of, train it, tame it so that it can behave in the way you want it to behave. And you see human beings doing this naturally, right? So if you look at it on just surface level, we tend to do this anyway. But I think we're expressing something that is typical of our consciousness, right? Whether or not we're cognizant of it or not on some level, right? We try to take things and like domesticate them or train them. We've done this with cats. We've done this with dogs even, right? It's like something that we like are driven to do. And I'm postulating that is what your consciousness is doing in your mind right now. And when people fail at it for whatever reason, that's why you keep coming back, because you have to master the body. Not destroy the ego, but you've got to tame it. Subdue it, whatever it is. And I believe that once you get used to doing that, if you're able to do it, that's why they keep sending us back. Like, I played with this in my mind. Why the fuck they keep sending people back here? But I think if there's like an overarching sort of like system, the idea is, they're sending people back because they need to learn to, for the sake of the race of consciousness entities that we are. We're not human beings. We're something else. Like, we're the aliens. Okay, so for the sake of the collective, it behooves us all collectively to control, and maybe control is not the right word, but to tame the beast, or fuck it. Like, it is what it is. That's the word. I said it, but that's what we're attempting to do. Domesticate the beast. Just exactly in the same way that the cordyceps essentially takes over the body, and this is nature, but takes over the body of the ant to get it to serve its needs. Yeah. Consciousness is trying to take over collectively, trying to take over the bodies of the Homo sapiens in order to get it to behave in a way that serves the collective's needs. And eventually we will reach a point where the human race, particularly in this reality, will become less, ape-like, less animal-like, right? Less like driven by reactivity and instinct, which is something you see in the animal kingdom, right? That's what that mind is. It's the mind of the body, and you're just trying to control it. So over time, we, as a collective consciousness that has uploaded itself into the bodies of a Homo sapiens, you'll see that we should become more conscious as consciousness slowly takes over and placates or tames the ape, the DNA, the instincts of the ape. Like, you're not the body, right? So I say ape, but I mean like that's what I saw this in a Doctor Who episode where the reptilians kept calling humans like stupid apes, right? So that's where I'm kind of pulling that from, because of, everything. So that's my theory. So I also want to kind of throw in, just for another visual, that movie Brave. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, skip over, I guess, the next 2 minutes, because that's what I'm going to be discussing, or pause it and go watch it, or if you don't care, keep listening. But in the movie Brave, there's a curse or whatever that happens. The kid, it's not really a curse, but the kid makes a wish and it turns her mother, spoiler alert, into a bear. And I remember watching that movie thinking, this is a analogy for consciousness. So I need you guys to think about that. So when her mom becomes a bear, right, you can see that. So when the consciousness of her mom comes through, she's gentle and loving and kind. But then the consciousness of the bear, or I should say the primal instincts of the bear, would like take over, and then she would behave in a particular way, right? And so that is the ego of the bear, right? We call it ego or whatever it is, but when you say, the next time you hear somebody say, oh, that's the ego, I need you to identify ego as, okay, that is the Siri of your computer. That is the personality of the bear, right? That another consciousness, like that you're trying to kind of grapple with for control. Watch Brave. Like seriously, after listening to this, go and watch Brave and think of what I said and watch like the mom and that sort of happening, because I think that is what is happening to us. Period. I mean, it's not even I think. I say I think because the problem is if you say certain things that challenge the status quo, it triggers the ego. It triggers the reptilian brains in certain people, and then they like attack you. So I started using things, certain words like I think or, maybe or what if. And I need to stop doing that because like it takes away from what I'm saying. Because like when people talk about gravity, they don't say, well, it maybe is this, or even though gravity is a fucking theory, they don't put all of these sort of apologetic framing around the word, right? But I guess as a Black woman or whatever, or, as a non-scientist, saying things that make sense and are obvious in some level, if you say things with a certain level of confidence, it triggers the reptilian brain in like, like for example, it's usually males that do this, but where they want to mansplain things to you, right? But I'm saying what I'm saying, and if it doesn't resonate with you, I don't give a fuck. So I've said what I said. Understand, obviously, that everything that I say in this podcast is theory, and I'm not gonna like put all the weird like caveats around it anymore. It is what it is, okay? But it makes fucking sense. So go back and watch Brave. If you haven't seen it already, go watch it. And watch it from the mother's perspective, because I think that's because that's what's going on. I mean, if you sit and you, for example, pause and you try to meditate, right? That voice, it's always negative and all that. The reason why it's always negative, it sounds negative to us because it is, but it is because the instinct, nature's instinct. Nature has its own intelligence. I said this in the beginning of my other podcast, The Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse. Nature has its own intelligence, and its intelligence is called instinct. And the primary drive for an animal on this planet is pure survival, because literally anything could fucking kill you. From a macro level to a micro level, anything can fucking kill you, okay? So, and by the way, all of this feeds into the simulation hypothesis. Just FYI. It's just a simulation on a level that we cannot grasp yet. But I think for such an advanced society of non-corporeal entities, non-corporeal beings who are capable of like projecting themselves through wormholes and taking over worlds and manipulating DNA, like this is a simulation. And especially if they're capable of reincarnating and playing with matter, they've basically figured out a way. This is a race of gods. That is what we are. So for a race of gods, right? The material world, matter, are like the equivalents of, or is the equivalence of like pixels, right? And, like playing with protons, neutrons, and electrons, like it's basically we're using matter and subatomic particles in quantum physics to manipulate whole worlds into a simulation, just like you would in a computer game. But on a macro level, it absolutely fits into the narrative of this being a simulation. It's just something that has been contrived by a much more advanced race that instead of using like gigabytes and terabytes and, whatever, I'm not a programmer, but whatever appropriate label is that, that people program games, with and code, right? They're using like matter and quarks and, strings and things like that. And worlds, whole worlds are their Sims. And you're not the body, right? So you are this orb, you are this consciousness. So think about yourself like that. And that race, they turn whole worlds. They use whole worlds as their entertainment, as their Sims. That's what I mean. And it sounds weird, but you need to sit on it and let that shit marinate, because then it starts to make sense. I mean, when we play video games, I'm saying, like, this is coming from somewhere. When we construct video games, it's like, well, we take things that we can control, right? With programming and things like that. And we program that, right? And make computer games. But something much more advanced than us, which I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm trying to get you to see things on one level. Something that is much more advanced than us would use whole worlds, would turn whole worlds into simulations. And so if you pull everything back and you think about the existence of quantum computers, and you think about all working together right now, Google D-Wave, and you think about things like parallel universes, and you think about, quantum immortality and all these things, like, clearly a more superior race, a race of gods, would absolutely be a simulation for them on that level. And now I'm saying that is us, not the humans. We're just inhumans, right? Your orb, soul, consciousness, whatever the fuck you want to call it, that is what you really are. And that is how we operate as a species of non-corporeal life forms. We are the non-corporeal life forms. We are the non-corporeal. Who we really are. You're not Ashley. You are wearing, or you have been uploaded. You are operating, you are driving the vehicle that is Ashley. And it has a certain sets of behaviors that you can manipulate. If you can bring your consciousness to the forefront, right? With the understanding that you are grappling with the personality, the persona, the ego of Ashley, right? That is the battle, so to speak, but not really a battle, right? When you go to tame a horse, you're not battling with the horse. It's just a certain set of behaviors and that you want it to exhibit, but you don't spoil the horse, right? The same thing with like a dog, right? You train a dog in a particular way. And some people are really good at training dogs. And some people, their dogs are like wild. You know what I mean? And I believe, I'm removing the caveats now. I'm just saying, let's just say that is how you get to the next world, right? The reason why you keep coming back here is because you need to demonstrate that you are capable of taming, this base level, this life form. And then the next step would be, okay, what comes after that? Now that you've tamed it, now that you're working in synergy with it, you understand that you're the one who's in control, right? You've successfully hijacked the body of the ant or the mouse or the human, right? You are the parasite, but not in a bad way, right? Like, come on. Like, there are people who love magic mushrooms and they go like, it's a fungi, and it changes your behavior, but it's good. Okay. So the same thing with consciousness, right? It is, as a parasite that changes, whole species and makes them behave in a different way, but it's good, right? So now when you sit and you listen to the voice in your head, there's not that battle there. You just understand that, yes, people have said it's the ego, you need to kill it. But like I said in the last episode, why? It's there. You just need to detach from it. You need to stop identifying with it. And I think that's the key. Once you can show that you can do that successfully, until you can, you're going to keep getting sent back here, because that's the purpose of here. I've said, I said in another video, this one doesn't, I feel like a lot of my videos get lost, in translation. But I said, Earth is a school where you learn what you are not. And that's exactly what it is, right? Even if you came back as a dog, you've got to know that you're not the dog, right? It's like how to train a dragon, right? How to train a human. Ooh, that's a good title. How to train the human, right? That is what this is. That's what this world is. And until you learn to train it, right, and become conscious and stay conscious, or I should say, until you've learned to successfully hold consciousness at the forefront of the mind and work in tandem with the beast, you're going to keep getting sent back here. And some people you can see, they're lost, and that's okay. I should explain the nature. I don't know if I did successfully, but I'm going to reiterate. So the voice in your head, the reason why it's always negative is because it's, if you take your consciousness and you upload it into like a gazelle in the Serengeti, and you gave it language and allowed, and it could think, I'm not saying that they don't think, but let's just say that just for the sake of illustration, that's what the case. Imagine what its thought process will be. There's probably gonna be a lot of fucking fear. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't have a lot of like defenses, right? There's predators everywhere. And so it's going to behave, accordingly. That's the same thing with this sort of naked chimp body, right? Like it has a lot of predators, not anymore. Like consciousness has allowed it so that, we are relatively insulated now from like, big cats and, viruses and things like that, for the most part, right? But, that's still in the DNA, right? It's a weaker species. The body is weaker, right? This body is weaker. So it's going to react to things to everything as a fucking threat, right? So that's how, like, watch a gazelle. Everything is a fucking threat. You know what I mean? But that is the nature of that beast. If you uploaded your consciousness into the body of a fucking lion, like, then it becomes kind of more, it's a predator's mind. So then everything is like, about a hunt. So like when, somebody says something to you the wrong way because there are no, natural predators anymore, you start seeing other people as, predators, and everything becomes an attack because once again, that's that instinct. That's the instinct. That's the mind of the beast that your consciousness is presently inhabiting. And then you kind of fall asleep, right? And then you lose it. You lose consciousness, and then you identify with, okay, that's what I am now, and then you get lost. So that is what is happening. That is why there's a lot of, there's a battle, it's an internal battle between what we call ego and consciousness, because that is what this world is. It's a grapple. You're here until you learn to, tame the beast. You're going to keep getting sent back here. That's what I think that is. And not as a punishment. It's just that is the job of your consciousness, is to learn, right? To master the self, to know the self, to know what you are not. All right. Yeah. I think that was a good one. I think I accomplished what I set out to accomplish in this episode. If you're not listening, feeling like, whoa, that was cool, then, that's probably your, the voice of your ego trying to tell you, this isn't true. But if it's telling you something, then clearly you know that you're listening to it. And if you're listening to it, then it's not you. But on some level that you're not the body. If you made it this far, it's because I'm reminding you. I always say, like, I'm not teaching people anything. Just reminding you who you are, right? It's like that movie Brave that I just, referenced. It's like she had to keep getting reminded, you're not a bear. She had to keep getting reminded you're not a bear. And a lot of this stuff, like, it does get suppressed and forgotten as we sort of identify with whatever persona that we are embodying at any given time, right? Like the kid who remembered his past life as a pilot. As he got older, some of the memory started to kind of fade, and he like interacted with certain people who would remind him of who he used to be, right? But over time, as he became more and more identified with the new persona, that information didn't go anywhere. It's just he's less able to, recall it, recollect it, because he's more and more identified with his new persona. So same, I'm telling you stuff that on some level. You wouldn't have listened this far if it wasn't resonating with you as truth on some level. Right? So yeah. Thanks for listening.